So that's how you make those connections, and that's how you advocate, and you just passion, I pass on. I pass on my love of languages, I pass on my experiences of the power of languages that I've had, and my students and everybody that I know. I just pass it on and just get everybody. I call them to my aid. That's advocating. And I let them tell stories and I let them partner with me. And now we have more power and a louder voice.
Hi, I'm Nora Jones. Welcome to It's About Language. This podcast connects language and culture to life, learning, and hope. You'll experience insightful conversations with creative leaders in the fields of education, business, arts, and science. My guests shed light on the impact of language and culture on individuals and society as they share their stories and experiences. You'll be informed and inspired as we explore how language and culture make us human and bring hope in the midst of a challenging world. Well, today it is my great pleasure to welcome Linda Markley as my guest to the podcast. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Nora. How are you?
I am doing well, and I'm doing especially well because talking to you is always a great pleasure. I want to make sure that folks that are listening understand that Linda is a lifelong learner and teacher and is so passionate that all of us that love learning, teaching, language, and outreach just follow Linda around like little ducklings. Linda actually won an award for advocacy, a national award for advocacy. I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about that because part of what you said, Linda, during the reception of that award on advocacy deeply touched everyone's hearts because you were talking about hearts. So what can you tell us about how to advocate for students, for teachers, for languages? How do you do it?
Well, it's like scaffolding a lesson plan. You just start, in the beginning, kind of it yourself. And maybe it's like a real world application too. You kind of take it from yourself to your immediate environment and the people around you. And then you take it to your community and then you take it to a bigger community. And next thing you know, it's out into the world. So I think that's basically how I have approached advocacy. It's from Latin, it means to call to one's aid. And so I just called on other people to help me to spread the good word of learning and learning languages and the importance that they have in the world.
It's interesting that you talk then about gaining a total community to help you, that you're not trying to do this on your own. Where did you begin when you started pulling people to help you, to be on that team, to call to your side, as you say?
I started with myself because I wanted to create a different experience for students who would then become ambassadors for world languages. So I would go to cocktail parties or, social events, and people would say, "What do you do for a living?" I'd say, "I'm a teacher." And they'd say, "Oh, what do you teach?" And I'd say, "Languages." And they'd go, "Oh." And then kind of the war stories would start. And, hopefully people that weren't twitching too much as they were talking about their experiences with languages. And what I got a lot of was, too much grammar, too much memorization. I took 100 years of Spanish or French or German, and I don't know how to say anything. And that just kind of broke my heart because to me, learning a language opens up your world. And you want to connect with other people and communicate with them and connect to their heart. It's a huge open door to the world. And I wanted to provide that for my students. So I looked to my own personal experiences and said, I want something kind of better for my students. I want them to have meaningful, personalized experiences with language. I had surveys. I've 30 something years of surveys from the very beginning of the year and every 9 weeks after that till the end of the year, getting input from students. What did you find to be helpful? What did you like? What didn't you like? What what do you think you can do with the language? What would you like to do with the language? And I would develop my lesson plans from there. I didn't really stick to a book and definitely not a workbook where it was just drill and kill and the grammar hammer. I tried to create little pods of real world scenarios in my classroom. And then to take it from there, I would invite people into the classroom, native speakers, administrators, come in and play with us, join along. Other subject areas, I would partner with art, music, and social studies and other subject areas and create little projects or little interactions to show the rest of the school how important languages were and how the kids could make connections to other subjects and other people. So
Linda,
that's how it started.
that's how it started. Okay, and one of the things that I'm hearing you there, and one of the things that's always been on my mind is language as a tool, not a topic. And when you made that language experience about cross-disciplinary, about real-world applications, so it sounds like, you didn't say it precisely, but it certainly sounds like the students responded well to that approach of bringing in what they were looking to accomplish in real life and cross-disciplinary things.
Yes, that's exactly it. We did field trips. If it wasn't a field trip out into the community to interact with Spanish speaking or French speaking people, it was to interact in cultural settings that had some historical connection to, Spain or France. For example, down in Miami, because I live in Florida, or over in Ybor City, where the cigar factories were, and all the Cubans that came there, and the little centros, the cultural centers that were there. And we would tour them and hear native speakers tell the history of them. And we just, St. Augustine is not too far from here. And we would go to, America's really first city that was founded by Ponce de Leon. So I tried to, take them out into the world, but then I wanted to bring the world into them. So we had little virtual field trips in the classroom. And with technology today, you can do all kinds of virtual field trips through the internet and everything. I just shared yesterday on Facebook a Holbrook Travel, a travel company, family-owned business in Florida, and they're struggling, but they're trying to still keep that excitement alive for travel. So they did a virtual demonstration of making arepas and cafe in Costa Rica. And so I shared it with my students and with Spanish teachers and said, here's a cultural experience that you can enjoy, that you can appreciate, how we're alike, but how we're different and how we're all, culturally connected, and also how we um, have so many commonalities in this, COVID situation we're in right now. And they're wearing masks and they're social distancing, but they're still having their arepas and their cafe. They're finding a way to still connect and communicate with one another. So it was a little, you know, kind of a peek at they can't travel there in person, so we could do it virtually.
Linda, we're started by chatting about advocacy, and our focus today is about advocacy broadly defined, 'tis true. It's been interesting, though, you've gone directly to the way that the class itself feels, the lessons that you provide, the ways that you uh, have the students interact with the world. Connect back again to what does this do for advocacy for languages?
It creates a positive experience if kids feel comfortable and they're allowed to be curious and explore, and they don't feel that there's a right or a wrong or that they're in an uncomfortable situation, that it's us against them. Just giving them opportunities to make those connections themselves and explore it on their own.
When you speak then with your colleagues, I mean, thinking about the folks in the world language department in the school that I used to teach in, for example, how we would interact and swap stories and make sure that we all understood what we were all doing together, although we had our own approaches. How did how does that go when you're working with, well, teachers that are, yes, perhaps in the same school or the same school district, but even larger? How bringing some of that vision, do you have any trouble bringing that vision to others, or is it the pathways that you bring help them to understand how to move in this direction also?
I mean, there are some that are not so open and receptive to, how other teachers do things, but all you can do is just model behaviors and just model what is best for your students and what's best for you. And so I just kept on my path, and others looked at it and were influenced by it and tried to do similar things, or we collaborated, cross schools too. I had my students that were pen pals, and we did video exchanges with other schools in Florida and outside of the country as well. So you can only model it and hope to make it very inviting for other people to come in and be curious and explore and play with you.
Hmm. Now, right now, we've been focusing a lot on their students, and we were taking a look a little bit here at your direct colleagues and so forth. Can you bring in then what happens when we're bringing this new vision of approach to administration? How much did they embrace the work and the advocacy? How might you have called them to your side?
Well, here again, it comes down to not having any fear of judgment, fear of not being not belonging or being invited in. So I would invite the administrators into the classroom and put them in a group with some kids and let them just play along with the kids and let the kids handle it. And the administrators would see how much the kids could do, how much they could speak the language, how much fun they were having, how meaningful it was to them. And it was a no brainer. The administrators saw that. And then we did a school-wide activity to involve colleagues, because sometimes there can be competition between languages just to get enrollment. And so we did a passport activity where every language student had a passport, and they would talk to different people in the school. They had to make connections to their different subject areas, about maybe a famous person in math who was a Hispanic, or that sort of exchange. And when they went in the cafeteria, they would get a stamp from the administrators, because the administrators were on cafeteria duty. And if a student went up and spoke to them and taught them a new phrase or a proverb or something like that in the target language, then the administrator would stamp their passport. So it became a school-wide awareness and kind of invitation, and then inclusion, where everybody was part of it and welcomed in.
Phenomenal. That's really pulling people to your side. Okay. So now help me with the language in the community. Now we're getting out into this country. One of the things that we know about the enrollment for, say, learning languages outside of one's native language in Europe has usually been placed at 97%. And the United States, the level overall is 20%. So, how do we bring your sense of advocacy and the joy that you've expressed so far out into the larger communities, out into our states?
Businesses, a lot of business connections, inviting business partner ins. Every school has a business partner. If you can connect it to a business that has a large population of employees, or a connection outside of the country with their business to a Spanish speaking country. I mean, Florida, we're the gateway to Central and South America. So there are a lot of businesses that do, trade, and their business is dependent upon these areas. And so we connected to them, invited them in to be guest speakers, to be mentors. My upper level students all had mentors that were native speakers, and we would have get-togethers, and they would come to the school and talk to the kids. They would talk to them on the phone. Then beyond that, the state organization, we made a lot of connections there with promoting languages, and then we went to the legislators and showed them, highlighted our program, highlighted student performances, had the students write letters to them. Ybor City, I mentioned earlier, they were going to tear down the Centro Asturiano in Ybor City, which was where all of the Asturian people came from Spain to work in the cigar factories. And my students were so moved by the beauty of it and the people that had a history there with their families that they wrote letters to the legislators in Florida. And lo and behold, they came up with some money to help preserve it. And the kids felt like they had done a great heroic deed. And it made them feel really good about themselves and their language skills and the power of language and having those cultural understandings and connections to be able to speak intelligently and have the power to make a difference.
There's a lot of push and pull with programs needing money, needing support, needing personnel, and so forth. What kind of response did you get from legislators at the, say, district or state level or beyond, based on the history you have nationally, to the idea of uh, increasing language and focusing on language?
Here again, it goes back to that experience that we're providing for the students in the classroom. We have to help them to feel empowered and that they can actually do things with the language and make a real world connection and see themselves out in the world using their language skills for meaningful purposes, kind of like the letters, for the Centro Estudiano. So in the district, we had a district superintendent that came in who had a very bad language experience, and he cut the language programs by 40% in his first year
Mm.
because he did not believe in languages. I've been at schools where principals didn't believe in languages, had a bad experience. Legislators, when I went to Tallahassee, when the coding bill came up and they were going to allow coding, computer coding classes to substitute for taking a language credit, the legislators, the ones that were voting against languages and in favor of the coding bill, they had bad experience as well. The one that introduced it, actually, that's how he presented it, was he had a bad experience. He found it very worthless to take a language, and he was from South Florida, and he had a resentment about that, and he didn't want his son to go through that same sort of bad experience because it basically was a waste of time in his opinion. And he presented that, and the legislators that didn't have a good experience, they agreed with him. So how did I turn that around?
Yeah.
Was I talked to the legislators that did have a good experience, or I took it from a human point of view and I said, at the end of the day, when you sit down to the table with your children and with your, spouse or whoever is at the table with you, an invited guest, do you want to make a heart connection through communicating, through language, or do you want to be using technology? Do you want them on their cell phones or on a device? And that resonated. And I said, opening up your heart to the rest of the world, that's what we really want to do. We don't want to be on a device. And computer coding is just going to create more devices. So that resonated.
It resonated, and that solved it, as it were. I mean, at least for that particular moment, that idea that human language is key. It's the heart-to-heart connection, that this is about humanity. There's a lot of still digital pushback, because, well, digital devices are so exciting to use and have so many compelling things going on to them. So how again do you speak currently? How else do you go about helping people to understand the humanity of language?
Making those real world connections, showing them how language is a powerful tool and a pathway to speak to someone's heart, to make a connection to their heart with common experiences, common human, behaviors, needs, wishes, desires, those sorts of things. We're all human beings, and we all, have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so, if you can tie your lessons into that and have the students have positive experiences and see themselves as human beings functioning with other human beings in the world and trying to understand each other and hold hands and live harmoniously together, accept each other's differences and appreciate them. Don't look at them as a threat or as something to judge and dismiss. Embrace it.
Linda, all of the speaking that you've been doing here today has been very about positive, having a positive look at humanity, having a positive look at our own experiences, being kind and compassionate to ourselves. You yourself have a website, spiritofteaching.org, where you speak about hope and you speak about kindness and being compassionate to others and to oneself. And I absolutely love the logo on your site and on the Sunday Spirit Spark newsletter that you put out that has an image that can look a lot like a sunrise, okay, light coming out, but in fact is evocative of a seashell. Can you talk about your site, about why there's a shell that also kind of looks like a sunrise, if you will? What are you doing there? What are you reaching out for? What are you helping people to do?
Well, that's actually my daughter's creative genius as a graphic designer and a filmmaker. But it is a shell, a shell from the Camino de Santiago, and it also is a sunrise to give hope and, new horizons and rebirth, sort of thing. And pathways. It looks like pathways as well. And also, there's a little filament in there, like a light bulb, like an epiphany, like making those connections and having those aha moments. And I think that that's what I tried to provide for my students, and that's the learning journey period for any subject, but especially for languages. It can be so powerful when they have those aha moments and make those heart connections. And I had that experience when I did go on the Camino de Santiago, and it's a pilgrimage. And it was a lot of learning, a lot of uh, falling down and making mistakes, and just picking myself back up, and another step, one foot in front of the other, and that's all we can do. And we have to give ourselves that permission and that kindness and compassion, and our students and anybody that we come across. It's needed so much, even, I mean, especially now.
Absolutely. When you do provide inspiration and resources for folks, what direction do you tend to take them? I know resources are all over the map, but where do you where do you find your greatest inspiration to share with others?
My greatest inspiration, well, it's all over that spiritofteaching.org website, and I'm trying to share it through the Spirit Spark on Sunday to kind of inspire teachers or anybody who wants to have a spark of inspiration and curiosity and creativity for the week, to just kind of figure things out as you go and just let your passion be your fuel for the week. And also through Teacher Tales, which is a podcast that I'm doing where teachers are telling their stories. And I'm hoping that it's healing to tell your story, but also for other teachers to hear that story, a little like making cultural connections with people from other countries. We are more similar than we are different. And there's healing in knowing that. There's power in knowing that. And so I'm hoping that that's what it's helping to do for all teachers, but especially for language teachers, because
Hmm.
it's getting harder and harder to keep our programs sponsored and supported and the resources for it.
Why do you think that's so, Linda?
In Florida, there are over 300 languages spoken, and you would think that, and it's a very much of a misconception. People will be like, Florida must have a lot of support for language programs, and it's not true. And I don't know if it's people just feel that it shouldn't be taught in schools because there are enough native speakers living here that can handle the job. But the thing is that they will handle the job because they can, because they have the language skills. And so we need to be teaching all children to learn another language so that they can bring that to their job. And there was a survey, and and here again, I talk to anybody and I pass my passion on to anybody. The Terminex guy that comes to my house, he sprays for bugs, and we have conversations about languages and other cultures. And he told me about an article he read that was about soft skills and Google and their employees, and how they, instead of technology skills, they wanted their employees to have a more open heart and connection to other people and cultures. And I took that from the Terminex guy. He shared that with me, and I used it when I went to Tallahassee and was advocating with the legislators against the coding bill. So that's how you make those connections, and that's how you advocate. And you just passion. I pass on. I pass on my love of languages. I pass on my experiences of the power of languages that I've had, and my students and everybody that I know. I just pass it on and just get everybody. I call them to my aid. That's advocating, and I let them tell stories, and I let them partner with me. And now we have more power and a louder voice.
Phenomenal. And with that website and with your Spirit Spark and with your podcasts, I was about to ask that question again. How do you call people to your side? But you just said it beautifully. That's exactly how you do it, by just reaching out and continuing to provide these conversations and pass it on. I pass
Mhm.
on, huh?
Yep. I mean, and there were legislators that saw me coming and ran the other way. Marco Rubio was one of them because he did not want to hear again and again and again, because he didn't want to take action on it for his own reasons and stuff.
Hmm.
But, and there will be people that will turn away, and it'll be uncomfortable, but I just share it with a lot of love and joy, and those that I don't push it on anyone that doesn't want to hear it, or if they turn away. But I somehow try to find a way to sneak into their heart too, with a little letter here or there, or a postcard, or a note, or just a smile. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Sneak into their heart. I love that part. Now, right now, we're looking at a still very much of a COVID world, and potentially a post-COVID world that's unfolding in front of us, of course. What do you see coming down the path? More hope? More need for advocacy? What is some of the vision that you have?
Advocacy for languages, absolutely, because I think that since we've been staying at home, isolating, not communicating as much as I think we took for granted the freedom we had to reach out, travel, experience other cultures and languages. And I think there's going to be a hunger for it once the COVID virus is under control and there's not the fear. So I see it a little bit like the whole classroom situation again. If there's a lot of fear and students are afraid to explore with the language, afraid to go outside of the classroom or outside of just my little conversation with the teacher, or there are even kids that won't even speak in class because they're so afraid. If we can get them to move beyond that fear and outside of the classroom and into the world, I think that's the power that we have to give to them, confidence that they know things and they can do things. And so I think in a COVID world, it's going to be the same thing. We're longing for it. We're longing for that connection and to understand other people around the world and make those heart connections. So I'm hoping that travel will be even greater and more people will be open to that, instead of, because we know now what it's like to be closed in and closed off.
Isn't that fascinating, Linda? You actually described like the pre-COVID experience of so many students in the world language classroom. Wow, phenomenal. Okay, so I'd like to ask you, I always ask my guests one final question, okay? And here it comes. What invitation would you give our listeners based on what we've talked about today, or basically anything that you would like to invite our listeners to do?
I would invite them to not be afraid, to see the possibilities, to believe in the possibilities, and to not be afraid to let your students explore and be curious, and to fail, which is first attempt in learning, to give yourself that same permission that learning is a journey. And this is back to the Camino. It's just one foot in front of the other. It's not a prescription like what's going on in schools nowadays. There's no real standard, although we say there are standards, but then we have to bring in differentiation to offset a standard. We have to allow for exploration and figuring things out along the way. So I invite everyone to give themselves permission and their students permission to just hold hands and get on that Camino and enjoy the journey and figure it out along the way, whatever you need, and just make it comfortable.
That's great. Thanks so much, Linda. Now, when folks will come to my website, fluencyonline.com, they'll have a chance to see some of the resources that you've provided and to link up to your website. I'm going to tell folks just a little bit what kind of resources you'll have for them there.
Well, there will be the website spiritofteaching.org and with the podcast, and you can sign up for a newsletter. But also I have done a few presentations on advocacy. So you can watch those with more ideas, more detailed information of what I've talked about today, like the passport activity at the school and that sort of thing. And then JNCL Nicholas, which is for world languages, our advocate in Washington, and they have Advocacy Day every year. So lots of resources there, and also for ACTFL, lots of resources there. So other advocacy tools, the state organization, I put a link in there too to a PowerPoint that you can take and use the different ideas and slides and stuff to create your own, and even videos that you can show during parent teacher night, or to any opportunity that you have at a PTA meeting, at the school board meeting, all of those things.
That's great. Lots of great resources. Thanks so much, Linda. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for this conversation today. It's been a lot of fun to talk with you and to learn, as always, from you.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's been great. So take care and keep advocating, okay?
I will. And I'm going to call everyone in my path to my aid.
I can well imagine it. I'm looking forward to seeing that continue. Take care now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. Let's continue the conversation. Be sure to check out my website, fluencyonline.com, to learn more about our guests and to check out the resources and information they've shared with us there. I have other ideas, resources, and opportunities there for you too. Again, thanks so much for listening, and until next time,